I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube, joined by the author of the Dark Shadows Daybook, Patrick McCray. We're here to discuss episode 1221 of 1841 Parallel Time. This opens up with the narration by Kate Jackson, who plays Daphne Heritage Collins. She's married to Bramwell by now. And this here, Patrick, is my favorite episode, and I'm going to tell you why.
I want to hear all about it. The
Because
doctor is in.
They give a wedding gift to Bramwell and Daphne. And what wedding gift do they give them? The portrait of Barnabas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Bed Bath & Beyond had a sale.
I don't think the writers are trolling here either. I think this is done on purpose for if the series had continued, I think they're using that portrait to get back to normal time.
Because I buy that for $1. Yeah.
I mean, that's the one. I know we don't see other scenes. We don't see any more scenes of the split rooms where we see normal time. But I think that's the reason they're introducing the portrait here. They do mention the portrait one other time before this, but they don't show it. Here they show it, mention it, and they mention the resemblance Bramwell has to his dad, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it's a good point. It is a very nostalgic moment, and I feel like it's a moment they've earned. Yeah. Because Bramwell is so different, and because the idea that this is a future that Barnabas never got, it's okay for it to look back. It's not the worst of what's called fan service. And, that's a whole other subject. I'm happy to get into it at some point if you like. But I think it's important to talk about fan service at some point. But this is not it, because this is the opposite.
Okay, we know this isn't fan service. So what's the difference between the writers making sure they're putting something in there for a story purpose or just fan service? What's the difference?
If they do it well.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I've known people who've complained about fan service and then turned around and gushed over some Easter egg or this or that, or just some small plot element or large plot element that they didn't have to put in. And how great was that? And then when it's something they don't like, it's fan service. And I think it's kind of like the difference between archetype and stereotype. A stereotype's an archetype you don't like. Right. Basically, or one that's doing it cartoonishly. I think it's the art is in concealing the art. The moment you feel like you're being manipulated, the moment you feel like, okay, this is it, the moment you feel like it could be taken out of the show or story and nothing would change, then that's fan service.
Yeah. Like, okay, for example, in Tim Burton's movie, Jonathan Frid, Laura Parker, David Selby, Kathleen Scott, that's fan service, right?
Yeah, that's a whole separate thing.
Okay.
If they were derailing the movie just to have them in there, we have very special guests. Oh, here come the very special guests. We've got to stop everything. And, like 15 minutes, you hear about these people, and then they just kind of walk on. That's one thing. But he's got to show that it's a big party. Yeah. For it to be a big party, people have to be coming to the big party.
Yeah.
And he has to be greeting them, welcoming them to Collinwood to show that he is now sort of the head of the household. And so if he's going to be greeting somebody, might as well be greeting the three of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Now, I like the fact that they have the portrait, because this here isn't fan service. They make it a part of their story. They make it a wedding gift. And I love how before they decide on giving them a wedding gift, Bramwell's like, oh, that's not important. The lottery's important. Catherine not going,
Yeah.
Bramwell has one of the best poker faces in this episode. He's all willing to let Catherine go into the room. And it's like, man, he's really taking this well.
So you think.
You're right. I really like to. We finally get a great mending scene between the two sisters because
Yes.
they'd been fighting, and here Daphne and Catherine, they're not completely mending the fences, but they're somewhat mending the fences because
Yeah,
Daphne fears for her sister.
I would agree.
You know.
I can't get over the fact. Well, okay, I have a minor thing. Jewel, you're actually talking about legitimate literature, so go on.
Well,
Um,
I really like the fact that in this sequence, when Daphne hears that Catherine has lost the lottery, that she's drawn the X, she runs out the house because Bramwell turns to her and she's just gone. The door is hanging open. I love how they shoot it. I love how they write it. It's really well done. And then we see Laura Parker, Catherine Heritage Collins, who's standing in the drawing room of the great house, and here comes Daphne to talk to her. And they had literally been fighting the whole time. And are you still there? What happened? Uh-oh. Hello? They had been fighting, and
Jewel, I heard none of that.
oh, sorry.
Whatever you said for the past minute, gone.
Well,
Sorry.
it's okay. What I had been saying was we see Julia come in, and after she reveals the wedding gift, and Bramwell offers her a brandy, and he gives it. So he goes and gets her brandy, and that's when Julia Collins tells Daphne that Catherine has lost the lottery, that she's got to go into the locked room. So Daphne is like not too happy with it. Bramwell overhears it, and then Bramwell and Julie are having this sort of argument, and then Bramwell turns to Daphne, and Daphne is like, I love how they shoot this. The doors are open of the old house, and like Daphne's just gone. And then that's where we cut to there's Catherine Heritage Collins, Laura Parker's character. She's in the Collins drawing room. She's in the great house, the drawing room, and here comes Daphne, and they have this great discussion of like they don't completely mend the fence, but they somewhat try to mend it here because Daphne's in fear of her sister's life. And the biggest thing is Daphne does not know her sister is with her husband's child of all things.
Yeah.
And like the discussion is even more important because you, the audience, know it, and you're sort of wanting to scream it at Daphne. I do have a question for you. I know it's a couple episodes away, but do you think the room made Daphne sick to punish Catherine for Bramwell switching or for Morgan switching places with her?
Wow. That's a lot to unpack. Why would the room want to punish her?
Well, because here's this. You've pointed this out too. Here's this woman who has doubted this room. She is a doubting Thomas, if you will.
Yeah.
She does not believe in the room. She does not believe in the curse, she's called it superstitious nonsense. And I mean literally she's called it superstitious nonsense. She's called them foolish for even doing this, even though she's agreed to take part in all of this. But she's more taking part of it to be a part of it more so than anything else. She doesn't actually believe in the room.
Yeah.
You know, she,
Well, I mean, it's very superstitious.
right.
The writing really is on the wall.
Yeah. And here she has to go in the room, and she still doesn't believe in the whole, even even though Gabriel has gone mad, even though people have died in that room. She has a logical explanation for it all. in her own words too. She even explains it out loud in this episode, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes to go into the room. What she doesn't know is Morgan's changed the lock. Quentin has the only other key. Morgan has now switched places with her. Here's the room, knowing that Morgan switches places with her, knowing that Morgan's in a room and not her, and she's drawn the losing slip. So the room goes, you know what? Since you didn't go in the room, I'm going to punish you by taking away your sister. You know?
Yeah.
She gets, I mean, she gets sick out of, I get Daphne's death is prophesized by Carrie, but maybe that's why it's prophesized. Not because she marries Bramwell, but because Catherine doesn't get to go into the room when she's supposed to.
Well, I think that's, if the room has that much volition, it would be interesting to see the statistics on, because I don't think they talk about this, although I can guess, on the number of women who've gone in versus the number of men who've gone in.
Right.
How many? Okay, so this is interesting. So 1690 is when the curse begins, and it's every generation.
Right.
So what would you say every generation is? Do they say exactly? Is it every 20 years?
My guess is if somebody dies in the room, then it's the next generation's turn. Because if Gabriel when they find when they think it's Gabriel at first, that they think they're spared because Gabriel died in the room, or
Okay.
even when Tim Braithwaite dies, they think they're sort of spared because somebody died in the room, but no, they're not spared because it wasn't a Collins. So my guess is if somebody dies in the room, isn't driven mad, because when you're driven mad, look how long I take it that Justin Collins lived a long life after he went mad. He just didn't
Oh yeah, I mean, so that had to be at least 20 years before.
Right. So I think it's if someone dies in a room, okay, that generation is now spared until the next set of kin come along. The next set of elders.
Okay.
That's my guess.
That's as good as any. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get an idea of how many people have actually died or have had to go into the room. So
because here's my take on it too. We know Justin went into the room. My guess is, because we don't, the one person we don't hear about in this time arc, and I know it's brief, we do hear a mention of 1795 very briefly. We hear about Josette and Barnabas. We don't hear nothing about Sarah. My guess is Sarah went into the room.
Sarah?
Yeah.
At what age?
My guess would be a teenager. I think Sarah did not die of an illness. She died in the room.
Wow. How old does someone have to be to go into the room, do you think?
I would say at least 18.
Even back then, I mean, 18 was, I mean, they were great grandmothers by then.
I know. I mean, it might be younger. It might be 13 because of the age, because of the era, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Again, my age difference might be off. So.
Well, I wouldn't say that too loudly, but continue.
But so that's my guess. Once every generation, that okay, if this person, like for example, if Joshua would have went into the room and Joshua would have died, okay, well Joshua would have spared his wife, his son, his daughter until they had a set of kids, and then one of them would have had to go in when they grew up, when they became an adult, so to speak. They would have had to have the lottery. So that if Gabriel would have died, he would have spared Morgan, Quentin, and when it's all the reason Morgan doesn't want a kid. Morgan doesn't want a kid because he doesn't want his kid to go through it, because that would be the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, imagine growing up with that.
Yeah,
I mean, no wonder, poor Gabriel's hit the sauce.
right.
It's, good
And
Lord.
Quentin, Quentin himself, we don't, again, we don't get to see the aftermath of all this because obviously Dark Shadows goes off the air and because the curse is lifted at the end. But if the curse would have somehow just continued, obviously, and somebody would have just died in the room, for example, I'll do a hypothesis. It would have been if Quentin would have chose to have a kid because Morgan, his foot's down, he's not having any kids. If Quentin would have chose to have kids, when his kids got old enough, they would have had to participate.
Do you think they have kids just so they have fodder to put in there?
I don't think they necessarily do it for that reason. I think they honestly generally fall in love. Now, could there have been an earlier generation right after Brutus who did that? Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, because there could be somebody like a Bram. Look at Bramwell. Bramwell does not give two shits about the room, in all honesty, until Catherine has to go in, and Catherine's pregnant with his kid, and he loves Catherine.
And they
So
don't seem to count Bromwell as even being worthy of dying in the room.
I know, and well, until the end.
Sure.
But you're right. They don't even more in the early episode. What does Morgan say? Oh, Bramwell's a coward. That's why he doesn't take place. But Catherine goes, no. The one thing Bramwell's not is a coward. Um, so I like how in this episode too, you have the importance of going back into the room because we haven't been in the room in quite a while, and the fact that you have the lottery drawing in the previous episode and the reveal in the previous episode, you have the aftermath of the reveal in this episode and the build up to going into the room. And there's a lot of conversation between you have Catherine and Daphne, you have Julia and Catherine have a conversation that's really good. And I love the conversation between Bramwell and Catherine, obviously, at the gazebo. It's finally Bramwell actually gives a shit about the consequences of that room.
It's become a very, very mature show.
Yeah.
In the best sense. I mean, I can't imagine these conversations taking place in 1897.
Yeah.
I can't imagine these they're too busy worried about gypsies and werewolves and weird hands and not just the ones on Aristide. The Excellency. They are talking about matters of genuine emotional substance.
Yeah.
And there is another sort of wonderful mystery in here, and that is, does Catherine have a cold, or has she been screaming a lot? Have you noticed Laura Parker sounds like Kate Jackson would sound in Scarecrow and Mrs. King?
Yeah.
She's very husky in this episode.
Yeah. Well, here's a question: could she have? And this is, I don't know. I'm not. Could she have been pregnant in real life?
Laura Parker?
Yeah.
She certainly was capable of it.
You know.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the timeline on her kids.
Yeah.
I know she had at least two before she got on Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
And then she has at least one daughter who's, by my standard, pretty young, but, so's Drew Barrymore, and Drew Barrymore now, looks fairly august. So, that's not necessarily the most reliable standard.
Right. It's either that or she was just honestly, maybe she was just sick in this episode or a couple episodes.
Oh, I don't think being pregnant is going to give you a husky voice. Although it could. I've never been pregnant. So, who knows, maybe one day, but it hasn't don't have a bun in the oven yet.
Yeah. I will say though too, in this episode, I like how Morgan's holding this box. I'm like, what's? I'm thinking when I watch this episode back, I'm thinking it's how funny how he literally closes the door and he uses. They don't show him using the secret passage, but you know that's what he uses to cut her off to get to the room before she does.
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
That's why it's in the house.
I love that little Dark Shadows plot ploy that they're going to use the secret entrance without showing it because it builds that suspension and it builds that suspension of disbelief of wait a minute, what's is Morgan really okay with her going in the room? Because this whole time he's been against women going in the room. He's been against women not participating in the lottery. And not just because of Catherine. It's something him and Quentin agreed upon that women should not participate in the lottery. And well, they got outvoted, obviously. And here they are. Here's Catherine. She was the first woman who drew the X. And well, Bramwell's got a trick up his sleeve, and his trick is to switch the locks and give Quentin the only key.
Yeah, that's very elaborate. He and Quentin are really putting a lot of thought into this.
How good of a dynamic? I mean, they become a dynamic duo in such a short time in these episodes. They've been working together to figure out the secret of the locked room. We talked about that a bit in the prior episode, but David Selby and Keith Prentice really had great chemistry.
They do. Keith in the last episode was doing less shouting,
Yep.
but in this episode he's back to his old tricks, but he's shouting very tenderly.
Yeah.
Do you notice that he's saying these very, very warm, emotional things, but he's still doing it like this? I'm beginning to wonder if he's maybe, has a hearing problem or something. Is the only way I don't know.
Well, even when he shouts at Catherine a bit, it's not as loud as it once was. Like he's still shouting, he's still talking at a loud tone, but it's not like in your ear shouting like he was. There are moments he still does that, but really I sort of think too he knows he's getting ready to play another character too in this very arc. He's getting ready to play it because not this episode, but the next episode, he isn't playing Morgan Collins anymore.
No, Morgan doesn't live here.
Yeah, the phone rings and answers, but no one's home.
So, so is he? Is he? Who is it? Andrew? Is that his name? Anthony Andrew Aloysius? What's the name of the guy that she has the affair with? That Amanda has the affair with? James Forsythe.
James Forsythe. Yeah.
Is he James Forsythe dreaming that he's Morgan Collins, or is he Morgan Collins dreaming he's James Forsythe? It could be either one. And of course, there's a real parallel here in parallel time between a cuckolded Brutus and a brutal cuckold Morgan.
Yeah. I love to not in this episode, but something we're gonna see in the next episode is how they think Morgan defeated the room. And that's going to be really interesting too when we talk about that one. But with this episode here, I love how Morgan's behind the door and he's telling her, "It's too late, Catherine. I've taken your place. I will not let you go into this room." I've talked about this in our prior episode. I mean, look, Morgan loved Catherine to death. I think if you have Catherine and Morgan in that room, I do think they would beat it.
Really?
Yep.
Well, that's what I asked. Would any pair of people be capable of doing that? Because Catherine has reasoning in this one as to how the room works,
Yeah.
And do you accept that reasoning, or is it?
No, I think here's the thing with we knowing Dark Shadows the way we all do, okay? we're told this room's cursed. We've been okay. Think about everything we've been told, and not everything we've been told is true. That's for certain. Look at the accuracy of the old Collins family history book. It wasn't 1,000% accurate. So I wanted to believe Catherine had her logical answers. Her logical explanation was the answer, but I I love Laura Parker and I love her character, but I knew she was wrong because I'm thinking, let's see, we've had Justin go crazy, we've had Gabriel go crazy. I mean, you could make the case Gabriel was half crazy before he went into the room because he's always drinking, but he never tried to murder anybody before he went into that room either.
Sure.
And then there's the death of Tim Braithwaite. It's like how there's just there's things you can't, there's things you can't just, even though she does give an explanation to that oh, Gabriel told him, okay, and Gabriel probably killed Tim prior, and okay, I like her explanation, but I don't completely believe that Gabriel did kill Tim. I believe the room killed him.
It's a great mystery. It's that perfect ambiguity that exists between believers and skeptics.
Yeah.
The skeptic has the rational explanation, and the believer has the deep desire to believe. And for whatever reason, they do have a deep desire to believe. And up to the point when we actually see the ghost of Brutus Collins, I really, of course, I'm going to lean towards skepticism, just because it makes sense. And I kind of wonder if the idea of having lived this lie for so long is something that is so unacceptable to them that they would rather, they would rather, live this myth than accept the fact that, maybe they've been investing their time in hogwash.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes Catherine's character so great and so different from everyone else. It's not, okay, yes, she didn't just, yes, she married into the Collins family, but where she really separates herself is she's a doubting Thomas. She's somebody who points at her and goes, yeah, no, that's just a bunch of BS. And she doesn't say BS, but in every sense of the way, that is what she's saying. She's applying sound logic to why things are happening the way they're happening, which you appreciate as an audience because it's great storytelling to have a character like that. And it makes her character all the more important for this arc.
It certainly does. And it's nice to have someone be an out and out skeptic, because characters in the real world and characters from the unreal world, the touched by the supernatural world and Dark Shadows, sometimes don't cross. I mean, Burke kind of has suspicions there's something going on, but really, he's not a guy who has to confront that stuff. And neither does Joe until he really does, and Joe can't handle it.
Yeah.
It destroys him.
What's your favorite part in this episode?
Oh gosh, I think it's seeing how good Morgan can be.
Yeah.
As a person, I think that makes his snap all the more surprising and just that much sadder.
Yeah. I think post Gabriel's death and seeing, again, I'm not trying to spoil it, but to see Morgan, Keith Prentice played James Forsythe, and they go back to Morgan and then start to question Catherine, that's where he's slowly going insane.
Yeah.
And then when the snap happens, it's like, oh my God. But it's so good when it happens too. but great writing and great performance. But yeah, you're right. It's really, really good. Um, I think we covered it all too.
There's a lot in this episode to cover, though.
Yeah, I like how when Kate Jackson's character, she when they're having that discussion, her and Catherine, and then finally she just yells at her. And then Morgan overhears, and she just tells her to leave. It's like, and then too, we get the, oh, I didn't think you, Bramwell telling Catherine, oh, I didn't know if you'd get my note or not. She did.
Certainly did.
Yeah, which I like. I mean, little story plots in these arcs and in these episodes is so criminally good.
If you had to rank 1841 parallel time in and amongst the major Dark Shadows storylines, what would be right above it and what would be right beneath it?
Okay, now beneath it, though, I like the Leviathan arc, but the Leviathan arc's beneath it, simply because I don't feel we ever have a proper payoff with the Leviathans. And above it, God, it's so tough. Because, see, I would tie this with 1995,
Okay.
but above it would be 1897, 1795, and right with it, like tied with it too, would be the beginning. I think it's right there with a lot of these arcs. It's good storytelling. It's when you go back through this and you watch how good it really is, it makes you appreciate it all the much more, because it's a complementary to everything you've been told.
Yes.
It complements everything that's been done before it by being so different. What was Dark Shadows? It was something different each time. Yes, we heard the story of Victoria Winters. Then we heard the story of Barnabas. Then we heard the story of Barnabas and Quentin. And then Quentin and Jenny, Magda, Count Patofe, and all those other characters. Then we heard the Leviathan story. And then in between we heard Adam's story. Again, Dark Shadows always found a way to be different than what it had done prior, which made it so great.
It reinvents itself very successfully.
Yep.
Now, here's another thought. Would the show have been a success? This is pure speculation. If they had begun with this storyline, if this storyline had inaugurated Dark Shadows as a series and then it had come forward to the present.
If they did it just like this, I think so.
Why?
Because you have an actual payoff too at the end of this.
Really do.
And that's key too. Look, there's beginning, there's middle, and there's end, and you need all three to have a proper context of a story. That's, I love Victoria Winters to death. She's my favorite character, but that's something we really don't get with Vicky. And with this, we do. We get beginning, middle, end. We get a beginning. We get, okay, we're in a parallel time room. Okay, we're being introduced to each character and what each character does and why each character matters throughout each and every episode. It's interchangeable. Like you said, there are 5 characters each episode. Well, okay, each character matters by the name of Collins and whoever interacts with them. And then we get the middle arc. We get there's a reveal of a baby. It's like, holy crap. And plus we get the investigation and of the room that you have Morgan and Quentin trying to investigate. And then you get the actual payoff, which is the end of this arc, which sadly is the end of the series, or is it? But
Big question.
it's it makes it all the more important as a story context.
Would you be disappointed to go from this to 1966 and that story?
No, because here's the thing. I wasn't disappointed when I wasn't disappointed when they wrote Victoria Winters out of Dark Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was disappointed is when the one thing I'm cool with is, hey, if you want to move on from a character, great. Do so and don't look back. Because if you keep lingering on a character and you keep teasing that character's return and you don't really do it, you're sort of just pissing on your audience.
Yeah.
And I do think they do it a bit with Victoria. And it's just like, I don't see the point in doing that unless you're going to actually bring back the character. For me, and then don't get me wrong, I'm not mad at Dark Shadows. Does it? No, but I'm just a bit disappointed that they do it a bit during the Leviathan arc when they're Victoria's dead, but it's like, just move on from the character. You don't have to mention, why even mention her? There's been no, you know what I mean?
Let me play devil's advocate on that.
Go ahead.
I think it perhaps makes the show more realistic. I mean, when people are bereaved,
right,
which is what you're dealing with, they're not going to go away. It almost would be inhumane. And another thing is that this is a show where everyone is obsessed with the past.
Yeah.
And so it kind of it for me it makes sense. I can live with it.
Right. I'm trying to think.
Your favorite moment overall in this episode?
Oh my God, the fact that they give the portrait to Bramwell and Daphne, because I do think it was. I secretly think this is the writers wink. It's not just a wink and a nod to the audience. I do think they were wanting to use the portrait for a story context, and I like it. It's really fun. It's a fun little. Here's Barnabas's portrait, and then you get the important conversation afterwards of Julia telling Daphne about Catherine. That's my favorite part.
I think that also has I love that, Jewel, and for me it has another kind of power also, in that it's not just a moment for the characters, it's a moment for us in the audience. And so what are we to take away from that? Well, I'm reminded of the power of the character of Barnabas Collins.
Yeah.
In this context, as kind of the founder of the family or one of them, but in the audience's context, we look at that portrait and we think, man, that guy really suffered, he really went through a lot of pain, but at least he was an active agent in everything that went on. At least he tried to have a choice, and that puts him against all of the people in 1841 parallel time who just are like lemmings and line up to jump off Widow's Hill, jump off the cliff.
Yeah. It's really, really good too. I think I would implore anybody to go back and what happened? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Hello. Hello. I lost Patrick there for a moment. Hopefully he'll come back.
What's that?
I'm thinking I lost you there for a minute.
I lost you. You were frozen.
Sorry about that. But My challenge to any Dark Shadows fan, if they listen to this, go watch these episodes individually, and I think you'll find a more appreciation for this arc.
Oh
That's the
yeah.
best way I can describe it, because I've come to appreciate this arc more now, because it's something that the writers did really well, and they put their best foot forward, and they didn't look back either. And that's something I love from writers and creators. Hey, we made a decision. God damn it, we're gonna live with that decision.
Yep. And they do. They really do.
another another great series that lives with decisions. DS9.
Yes, and I'll tell you what, if you have not seen Picard season 3, you're about to have a lot of DS9 on your hands. Not necessarily the station,
Yeah.
but the events in and around it. Have you been watching it?
No, I'm gonna start watching. Butch recommended it to me too. So
It's interesting. It's now that is a show that arguably does have a lot of fan service.
yeah,
There's one episode that's almost entirely fan service, even
yeah,
more than the other ones. But I like these things. I think they were so burned um, on how Next Generation just kind of stopped with Nemesis
yeah,
and how Enterprise had a non-ending. I
yeah.
think they're really determined to give this thing as much of an ending as they just humanly can.
As long as they don't mess up Strange New Worlds.
I'm watching that again, and gosh, let me tell you, what a good show.
Yep.
What a good show.
I will definitely check out Picard season 3. I'll watch the first episode sometime tomorrow.
All
But
right. Well, let's talk about it when you do.
we will for sure. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
I really, especially watching it like this, I've had this feeling before, but never, well, almost never as poignantly. You really do feel like it's the end.
Yeah.
You really feel like it's the end in some big ways. And as sad as that is, the gift of Dark Shadows is that it's, as I say in the book, it's not a straight line, right to left continuum. It's a Mobius strip. And if you follow the path, you'll always find yourself back at the beginning. And so, how can I say it's the end? How can I say 1841 is the end when 1966 is right around the corner?
Absolutely. Great episode. Really well written, really well acted by all the actors and actresses. Great job. But yeah, guys, link to the Dark Shadows Stable Unbound is going to be in the description box. Go pick that up and go check it out. Patrick, my friend, it has been a pleasure as always.
Always a pleasure, Jewel. Thank you so much for having me on.
What are you doing tomorrow night?
I'm going to be talking about episode 1222, I hope.
We are tomorrow night, Friday night, episode 1222. Me and Patrick will be back there.
This is how we do it. It's Friday night, and I feel all right.
That's right. You have a good night, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.